As I indicated to you in our conversation this morning, when we did the literature review for the Ministry of Education at UBC through HELL, we found studies, initially startling studies, that demonstrated that full day K did not make a significant positive difference when it was implemented. We found studies that said absolutely the opposite, that full day K had made a distinct difference to future school success for children. So Jane Bertrand and I, Jane is from Ontario and well known there in helping to lead the early learning initiatives. Jane Bertrand and I decided to start digging into the different research studies to look at what it was that was different about the ones that said that full day K had not been highly successful. Two studies that have stood out historically and stand the test of time are the ABC-Darian study, which is spelled just as it sounds, ABC-Darian study, and the Perry preschool study. There are others that are significant. When we looked at what made the difference in implementation, these were the 5 variables that seem to have been most consistently applied where the research studies showed that results had been positive. And some of these studies are from the Scandinavian countries where not only, again, there's another variable, as Susan mentioned, not only did they have full day K, they also had full day as 4-year-olds. So it's part of why I said this morning I'm so eager to see a 4-year-old program implemented, because we're going to get our, quote, bigger bang for the buck the further we go into serving early learners. But let me comment on just a few of them. The use of the additional time. How is that time applied in the classroom? And that's very much linked to the second one, developmentally appropriate practice. Are the practices that are applied consistent with what we know about the research on appropriate developmental learning, which is play-based learning? I'm going to make further comments about play-based later this afternoon, so I'm not going to pause there. The literature is very clear that double dosing what you're doing in the morning isn't going to make much of a difference. That in fact that additional time needs to be used to extend if the learning in the morning was appropriate, and let me comment on that, to first of all determine if the learning and the application of resources in the morning was appropriate, then the additional time would be spent extending those skills into experimentation, observation, providing children with all kinds of ways to practice previous learning that is really important. And I want to myself put a caution out, just as a few of you have alluded to this morning. All is not necessarily well in our kindergarten classrooms across the province. So we need to be not only looking and visiting what should an extended day look like, we need to be revisiting what should it look like in the first place. And I was in a school, been in a number in the last few years with my research, but just 2 weeks ago I was in a school, I was visiting a nursery classroom, a preschool classroom, and I heard next door in a kindergarten classroom, "Okay, class, this is A, say A." Now, what does A say? No response from the kids. Ah. Let's all say it together. A says ah, and then there was a string of going through the alphabet doing this with 25-year-olds, and so I couldn't help myself. I went over and looked in the window because I thought this must be out of context. This must be something that is out of context from my experience and my background. And I went and looked in the window, and I knew it wasn't out of context because it was a kindergarten classroom that had tables around the room. There was no equipment along the sides of the room. There were no learning centers set up, and there was nothing visually interesting in the room except charts on the wall that had the ABCs on it. And you know, my heart ached. It ached for what those children were missing. So I think we need to revisit, to inspire, to excite, to bring along those people who either didn't understand how kindergarten was supposed to be because they didn't start there, or who have lost the spirit for it. And I think we can do that. I think this is exciting, and I think we can pull people back into the excitement. I did find out, by the way, when I went to see the principal because I felt somebody had to say something, and if it was only me that knew it, so I went to see the principal and reported what my feelings were on it, and it turned out that it was a former grade 4 teacher who had had discipline problems. And so the decision had been made to put her in kindergarten. So if it's happened in one place, it's happened others, and I'm raising that we need to revisit all of it, and we need to revisit all of it together. Accountability, Pat Holborn, she and the team she works with have just done an outstanding job of developing tools for tracking individual student development in an appropriate way. And I just applaud the work that they've done. So we have a really strong base here in the province for accountability. Enhanced professional development worries me from a systemic point of view, just for the reason I just expressed. If we're going to revisit and re-excite and re-energize all of the kindergarten teachers in the province, and if it's going to stick, we also have to re-energize all of the principals in the province about early learning issues, so that people like the principal I went and spoke to, who's responsible for supervising that school, would have known without me telling him or her that there was a problem in the kindergarten classroom. So fourth one, human, facility, and resources. Well, human is absolutely essential. There's no way around that one. Facility, you know what? How many of you have had to create library centers by stacking bricks and boards together and putting crepe paper up to the top in a tent so it looked nice? How many of you have had your husbands come into your classroom and hammer together some pieces of wood so that you had something to put something on? I mean, this is where we came from in the 70s and 80s and 90s. This is nothing new. And when I worked with the ministry evaluating and help evaluating the Strong Start classrooms, which started overnight, that was another brilliant government decision. And it started overnight, and no one was apologizing for it. It was take it and make it work and enjoy it. Some of those teachers were carrying buckets of water from one end of the school to the other so they could have painting. And they were not deterred in the slightest. I didn't meet one that said, no painting in my room because I have no water. They were trucking it there. And we might have to do that for a little while with resources. There's a book at the back. These are exceptional. And that new one, which is the red one, I only got it about a month ago, is absolutely loaded with materials teachers can put out that would create the most magical, innovative, imaginative centers for children you could possibly create. And all the stuff is all around us. So I'm not too worried about resources. We have to encourage our teachers to get excited. And there's several. We've given you a list in your folder.
Yep.
Investments before, during, and after school, I do want to comment on after kindergarten. The research is really, really clear that early learning programs will work best when they are interconnected with the other early learning programs in the neighborhood. I'm not talking about in the town, I'm talking about in the neighborhood. So I think there's a new task for principals coming up. And that is going to be to find ways to become connected in a systematic way with every other service in the community that connects with young families. And the investment you'll be making is in the children that are coming up, because we saw this with Strong Start. One of the ministry's criteria for Strong Start was that they had to be connected with early learning community agencies. And we discovered that as soon as one child was connected, they were finding a brother that had the same hearing deficit that was 2 years younger. There were all kinds of services and interventions being applied because the school got involved. So that's a really important one, and you're going to see an increasing emphasis on that in your communities.